I can do that. So let me pull up this bio, and it's got a lot of cool information in it. Author David Fitzgerald is an award-winning writer, historical researcher, and an atheist activist who lectures internationally at universities and secular events. And he's a frequent guest on many podcasts. I've seen him all over the internet. He has been a passionate advocate for atheism, civil rights, counter-apologetics, and secular humanism his entire adult life. As a historical researcher, he has been actively investigating the historical Jesus question for over 24 years and was an associate member of the CSER, the former Committee for the Scientific Examination of Religion. He's the author of the, I hope some of these aren't in our poll because people are going to, well, I have to read them. It's in the bio. He is the author of the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion series, including The Mormons. His book, Nailed, 10 Christian Myths That Show Jesus Never Existed at All, and Jesus, Mything in Action, and they examine secular arguments for or against the historical Jesus.
I
His
ended the
right.
poll, Rob, so we're safe.
Okay, good. His writings have appeared in print and online in Skeptical Inquirer, yay, Skeptical Inquirer, I write for them too, Slate, Secular World, American Atheist Magazine, and elsewhere. He's appeared in several films and television shows, including The Atheist Experience, Batman and Jesus, My Week in Atheism, Marketing the Messiah, and others. And with his wife, actress and author Dana Fedsty, he is also co-author of the science fiction trilogy, here's the answer, Time Shards from Titan Books UK. He has debated and lectured at Stanford and UC Berkeley, has been a book reviewer for the Journal of Higher Criticism, and the star of his very own podcast, The Myth of Jesus with David Fitzgerald. More information about David can be found on his website, davidfitzgerald.org. And by the way, I'm going to throw this in there. David Fitzgerald's name is not to be confused with the author of one of the best original Star Trek episodes ever, David Gerald, who wrote The Trouble with Tribbles. Welcome, David.
One
Thanks.
thing he didn't write.
That's right. Exactly.
We should have put The Trouble with Tribbles in the poll. Why didn't we do that? Oh.
Oh, you're
Lost
right.
opportunity.
I think that might have been a little before your time, though.
Slightly. Yeah, just fun fact, I literally this week just turned 60. So it's just
Oh, happy birthday.
barely there. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday.
Oh,
I love it. Oh, you're getting happy birthday cakes in the chat.
oh, yay.
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
have no idea how somebody did that. That's
I
cool.
don't either, but that was cool. Well, we are so glad that you joined us on your birthday week. Oh, Glenda's giving you birthday cakes too.
Wow. That's impressive.
Amazing. I can't even get emojis to work in here.
uh, oh, we always need to use magic.
Yes, but real. Rob, show us your shirt.
There we go. There we go.
Ah, I love
Science like magic, but real.
it. Yay.
I love it. Well, David, we are so excited to have you back for a fourth time. There is so much to cover on this topic, and you keep bringing us more fun, interesting, insightful, thought-provoking information. Tell us more. What do you have for us today?
Honestly, there's so much, every single portion of this talk we could spend all night talking about, all night. And then we could talk about all the stuff I haven't written yet, like the sex and violence in the Bible book and all the stuff I want to bring out in that book. But yeah, it blows my mind just how many things have popped up within the last 2 or 3 years in biblical studies and religious studies in general. So much so that, again, I was working on Sex and Violence in the Bible, clearly a best-selling title to be having. And I had to stop in the middle of it because of all the crazy stuff that has come out in just the last 2 or 3 years, and work on that book instead. And that's why Playing God has come out before that.
Excellent. And you're on it's volume 3, right? Of Playing God?
Well, Playing God is a 3-volume book. They all came out at the same time.
Okay. So then the next, the sex and violence in the Bible is going to be a separate series from that, or a separate
it'll
thing
be part of
entirely.
that same series, the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion. It'll be book 8 in the series.
Got it.
unless it turns out to be another 3-part book, which has happened twice already, where I set out to write a book and they turn into triplets. So um,
Wow.
we'll see.
Well,
I'm
I
aiming
can't
for a
wait.
short, funny book though, and just keep it short and sweet. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, we're gonna look forward to that, and I'm loving some of the alternative title options that are popping up in the chat. It could be sax and violins, but well, the more musical title, that'll be about the music in the Bible. That's a later volume in the series, I guess.
If you guys have gone on YouTube, or if you've seen the talk that I do called "Sexy Violence, Violent Sex: The Weird Ass Morality of the Bible," that's the full title of the of the talk.
Oh, I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I feel like that could be a good selling title. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that sounds like it might sell.
You know?
I would read it.
Yeah. Excellent. All this blasphemy is not going to write itself. I got to get on the case and finish it up. But
Yes, but
anyway,
not before you tell us
right.
about your current information you're going to share with us tonight.
All right. So last time, if I'm not mistaken, I talked about like the second the second 2/3 of the trilogy, which was
Mhm.
talking about kicking the biographical the founder figures backstories and checking
Yeah.
them and seeing how they hold up under investigation. Hey, who's this?
Yeah.
But
A guest cat.
hey, so basically, in a nutshell, if you go to all the top 10 major world religions and look into how well their bios hold up for their founder figures, every single one of them is majorly problematic, to the point where now one of my major takeaways is that it looks like it's norm for major world religions to start out with a purely 100% made up imaginary founder figure. Um, Full stop. And if you know nothing else except that, you know more than everybody who knows everything else, but not that.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Main point up front.
yeah. So this time around, I'm talking about volume 1 of Playing God. Let's see if I can get this to appear. There we go. Volume 1. Stop muting. There we go. Um, it's a 2-parter. It's part 1 is the evolution of God, where I talk about the evolutionary stages that all our world religions, big or small, seem to have gone through. And part 2 is the the gods of monotheism, where I talk about all the crazy twists and turns that got us from believing in many gods to just one god, and how it's not a straight shot whatsoever. Um, so yeah, I guess the easy thing to do is jump right in. And
Yeah.
I start sharing the slideshow.
Go right ahead.
Do that. Where are you, slideshow? Here we go. So if you guys have seen me do a talk before, you'll know it's already very polished, very professorial, no flubs whatsoever. We're going to be a little bit more informal today, I think is the way to do it.
Love it.
And just see how that goes. So yeah, basically, it's a brand new book, Playing God, turned out to be triplets, and this is what they look like. And let's see. I'll try to follow along in my script, but in a pinch, we'll just keep it loosey goosey and quick and dirty. Maybe the hardest thing about writing a book about evolutionary history of world religion is writing a short book about the evolutionary history of world religion. And I have the same talks about giving talks on the problem with talks on the subject. So last time we focused on the other volumes. Let me see where I was going. Oh, here, yes. The closer we look at all these founder figures, your Moses, your Jesus, your Muhammads, your Buddhas, not only do they all appear to be fictitious, but it seems to be the norm for major world religions to start with a completely imaginary founder figure. So with all this stuff, and again, this is fascinating, mind-blowing stuff. Let me start with the first part, the evolution of God. I don't know how many of you have seen this cartoon. I absolutely love it. It starts with magic rocks, magic animals, and goes all the way to people who claim to speak for people who claim to have come from the sky. The funny thing about it is, though, it doesn't seem to be the case of how religions, in fact, throughout the world, seem to go through 6 or 7 very particular stages. And I am indebted to a lot of this part of the book to a book by Robert Wright called The Evolution of God, where he and all the authors and historians and social scientists he cites talk about all these religious stages. Also, Daniel Dennett's Breaking the Spell, David Sloan Wilson's Evolution for Everybody, and Darwin's Cathedral. But let's just start. Um, Several fields of science have led to fascinating developments in the study of religion and its origins and development through time. We are pattern-seeking animals, and we have a lot to say about the early survival mechanisms that tend to encourage and or get co-opted by religion, including ones that are left over long after they become useful. And let's see, there's this great quote from Xenophanes. The Ethiops say their gods are flat-nosed and black, while the Thracians says they have blue eyes and red hair. But if cattle or horses or lions had hands and could sculpt like men, I'm missing part of the slide because it's covered by what your guys' faces. But you get the gist of it. Can you see the entire slide, or are you also blocked?
Yes. No,
Okay.
we can see the whole slide.
Okay, perfect. So you're
Yeah.
in better shape than I am, actually.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like, if you'd like, I can read the text if that would be helpful.
It's good. It's fine. We're
Okay.
just gonna. This is like I said. This is gonna be quick and dirty. Um, some of the things, for instance, there's one survival mechanism we have that's um, overactive agency detection and attribution. What that means is it's safer to be wrong about a tiger that's not really there than it is to be wrong about a tiger that is really there. So we have this innate tendency to ascribe agency to inanimate parts of our environment. So it's easy to see faces in clouds. It's easy to see people in trees, ghosts. Whenever you see something you don't quite can't tell what it is.
Or we see drones in the sky when you're just looking at aircraft.
Exactly so. And chimpanzee society shows some clear parallels with human society, political alliances, competition for sex partners, et cetera, et cetera. Reciprocal altruism, and we could add authority figures and parental figures to that. In small groups, you can't just misbehave without consequences. There are no anonymous crimes. And there's a whole slew of different of these survival mechanisms, mental survival mechanisms that, for instance, Pascal Boyer calls a bag of good tricks that we use and have been co-opted, not just by religion, but in all kinds of social interactions. And this is even before we are human. This is just by benefit of being a social animal. Religion before religion. When we try to see things through our ancestors' eyes, it's really interesting to think about how much they had in their environment that inspired fear and wonder. There's preys and predators, flying birds, snakes, fire, ocean. You can read this as well as I can. But all these things that we take for granted, but to them, they didn't understand the underpinning of any of these things. And just to point out one, just the thought of what dreams must have been like to our ancestors. Being able to see your Uncle Zog, who died 100 seasons ago, and yet he came to you last night and told you something or had a message. Fire. I mean, we can't even imagine what fire must have been like to our earliest ancestors because it's not alive, but it is alive. It's not physical, but but it is. It can burn you. It can make you warm. It can heat your food. All these things that we take for granted, understand completely well, were baffling mysteries to be solved for them. Uh-oh, why are you not sharing? Come here.
We can still see the slide, the prehistoric roots of religion.
Let me see if I can move on to the next slide. Can you stop sharing and I'll share it again?
Yes, I can. That I have the power to do. Okay. You have stopped sharing.
Oh, here we go. All right, did that. And let me try it one more time. Let's hit play again. Wonder if I just waited too long. There we go. So social support.
I'm not seeing it yet.
Not seeing it. Nope.
Let me get in here. Let's share it. Hit the share button. Oop.
Oh, I wonder if when I stopped your oh, no, there it is.
There it
Okay.
goes. There it goes. I think it's the difference between playing and previewing it.
Ah,
But I don't know. It's all a hazy mystery for me, really. Uh,
there it is.
so there's a conformist bias in social animals. As humans evolved in small groups, and survival depended more on social support, sharing food, fighting together, than in challenging incorrect beliefs. Um, and besides, religious beliefs largely consist of claims that are tough to falsify in the first place. Prehistoric morality, then as in now, largely is religion is largely devoted to explaining why good and bad things happen. Um, Even if religion is largely about morality today, it doesn't seem to have begun that way. For instance, for primitive people, so-called primitive people, early man and women, outsiders aren't even people. Universal love is not even a religious ideal. If you bump into a stranger you don't know, you try to kill each other. Um, 19th century scholars were surprised that so called savages had well defined and praiseworthy morals, but it wasn't one based on any divine laws that had been handed down to them. Hunter gatherer societies, their morals are grounded in tradition and public opinion, not religion. And there's almost always an afterlife, but there's never any karmic scorekeeping or heaven hell carrot or stick scheme. And often everybody's spirit goes to the same place. And in the societies where there are subdivisions to where you go in the afterlife, it wouldn't depend on how you lived, but on how you died. For instance, for Andaman Islanders, those who drowned became sea spirits, otherwise, you become a jungle spirit. Um, and again, even primitive so called religion has been culturally evolving for a long, long time. Finding agency in nature, pre-humans tend to find agency in nature just through sharpening their social interactions with each other. First by wondering, is he going to punch me? Is she going to betray me? And then by thinking, well, if bad things happen, it often means that somebody's mad at me, and maybe I need to make it right. Well, if we substitute someone for some god or spirit, now you're following a rule that is behind every religious impulse. So there were many supernatural beings to choose from: elemental forces, animal spirits, ancestors, a high god. Not every society or culture seemed to have a high god. And the ones that did, wasn't a god that controlled the other spirits. It was just the most important, and usually a creator god. But it's important to note there was no pantheon. And in fact, this is crazy to me, but hunter gatherer religion doesn't really exist. The kinds of beliefs and rituals we think of as religious, they're so interwoven with everyday life that they don't have a word for them. The supernatural worlds and the natural worlds are one and the same. This leads to some interesting consequences. For instance, the problem of evil, which our theologians have wrestled with and never really solved, isn't a problem at all for them, because none of their gods are all powerful or morally perfect, and they don't worship them. In fact, sometimes they get pissed off and berate them. But that changes when we hit the next stage. The next stage is shamans, and that's when you finally get somebody who says, "Oh, yeah, I can talk to the gods for you." And that middleman, um, I'm going to burn through all these real fast and just see if by keeping my finger on the button, we can get through them without freezing up. So they'd have an impressive array of magician's tricks, like ventriloquism, sleight of hands. And ironically, rival shamans were ruthless to each other in exposing fakes. Like many cultures, drugs and hallucinogens were employed, as well as fasting, sleeplessness, even self mutilation. Some shamans had a more neurotic bent, they were hearing voices, or some just had a moody artistic temperament. Were they sincere? Well, I mean, no doubt, like any other spiritual tradition, they probably ran the gamut between true believers and outright frauds. Still, as anthropologist Paul Redeem points out, it's hard to say there's no exploitation of power when shamans get gifts by instilling irrational fears, or, for example, telling women that the best way to please the gods is by having sex with your shaman. And he, in fact, considers shamans as serving a single interest group: shamans. In any case, whether they were 100% sincere or totally calculating, many shamans were able to turn their powers into material gain and or political power. And when spiritual leadership joins up with political leadership, things really start to heat up. With the invention of agriculture, the virtues of religion and the character of God start to change. The most advanced social organizations 7,000 years ago were chiefdoms, and they seem to be the standard next step from hunter-gatherer societies to early ancient states, such as Egypt and Shang China, and more recently in Polynesia, Africa, and the Americas. They have lots of differences, but one commonality is a reliance on the supernatural. Their political and religious structures are deeply intertwined. They have many gods. Every vocational niche had its own god, and every serious enterprise, like canoe building, was a religious affair involving detailed rituals, prayers, and ceremony. Crime and punishment was meted out by the chief's armed retainers or by ghosts who frowned on bad behavior. In Polynesian life, key principles undergirded things: tapu or taboo, and mana. Tapu were the forbidden things, such as casual contact with the chief, who was descended by the gods and therefore drenched with mana, the divine power of chieftain kings. Commoners groveled for them, and human sacrifice was common. In the Society Islands, you'll love this, candidates for sacrifice included prisoners of wars, blasphemers, and any person obnoxious to the chief or priests. Despite this, rulership did have some checks and balances. In Tahiti, unhappy priests and elites could strip a persistently despotic chief of power, and competition with other chieftains also helped chieftains honest. Some argue that the logic of free enterprise was not as obvious back then, and these religions did things that modern life handles with governments. So all these chieftainly perks they enjoyed could be seen as payments for administrative services. And Polynesian culture did develop at least one science, stellar navigation. Captain Cook noticed, in fact, that Tahitian navigator priest astronomers tracked heavenly bodies with more precision than European astronomers. Ancient city-states. Well, as agriculture continues to allow civilizations to grow bigger and bigger, it goes into the next step, which is city-state level societies, with usually more elaborate government bureaucracies and a new, more advanced information technology, usually a full-fledged writing system. But like chieftains, religion still pervaded life. Gods of city-states like ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt and China, and other places were basically human, warts and all, but with supernatural powers. And so with all these new vocations, there were more gods than ever. Gods for farmers, scribes, merchants, craftsmen, brewers, brickmakers, livestock pin makers, you name it. Mesopotamian scribes listed nearly 2,000 names to their various pantheons. And what about neighboring gods? As polytheists, tolerance wasn't an unsurmountable problem. If you trade with another city or enter into a military alliance with them, you might even want to go beyond mere tolerance and actively embrace their gods too. As polytheists, there was no need to contest the existence of other gods. If they joined together in fruitful trade or military alliance, it was simple enough to acknowledge neighboring gods, even pay their respects to them in hopes that your new partners might reciprocate. This is what appeared to happen in early Mesopotamia. As the cities became increasingly intertwined in a web of reciprocal reliance as trade partners or military allies, this was played out at the divine level as well. And the gods of different cities coalesced into a regional pantheon. In fact, they became family, and theologians hashed out the details of their divine family tree. Basically, the final stage is when you get universal multicultural empires. And when that happens, when city-states grow into empires, and when these empires conquer people with different cultures, languages, and gods, interesting things start to happen. Gods in different empires seem to join up, and gods seem to be conflated with each other. For instance, when Sargon of Akkad conquered the Sumerian city of Nippur, he convinced local priests to agree that his victory was the will of their god, Enlil, and set up his daughter as the high priestess of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, and announced that Inanna and the Akkadian goddess Ishtar were one and the same. Very convenient, very helpful. So, in the interest of uniting all their subject peoples, rulers find it incredibly useful, increasingly, to have a god for everyone, a transcendent deity who is above it all and who loves everybody. So we find we find universalism, an ethical core, and an inclination towards monotheism. All right. Um, let's just leave the slides there. If when they stop, we'll just stop with that. Here's our tradition.
Okay.
We normally think that primitive people worshipped everything. The stones were gods, rocks were gods, rivers were gods. And then it became a pantheon. And then that got whittled down to one true God. Um, and the actual truth is that there's so many more theological options, and the actual path to what we think of as monotheism has all these way stations in between. Um, and even these categories aren't so cut and dry, because gods can go up and down the social ladders through commerce, cooperation, or conquest. They can join up with other gods to form a pantheon, or they can fall out of favor. And of course, even a single monotheistic god can be a three-in-one, with an only begotten Son, a holy Virgin Mother, and a dove-like Holy Spirit, along with a bevy of saints, angels, and archangels. I don't know if we can really grasp how radical a leap it was to go from a world chock full of gods to declare that there was only just one, and only had been ever just the one, which is what makes Judaism, and vicariously Christianity and Islam, so amazing and so special. Because with the Abrahamic tradition, for the very first time, we have real monotheism. Oh wait, hold on. Oh, sorry. I'm being told that's actually not true, because the Abrahamic religions are not the first monotheists. The first monotheists, in fact, was made in 14th century BCE Egypt, and that ended in failure. That was the pharaoh Akhenaten. At his time, the priesthood of Amun. Oh, and then we're out of it. Okay, but in his time, the priesthood of the god Amun wielded unprecedented power, owned vast wealth and land holdings, and oversaw a commercial empire. At one point, the temple of Amun at Karnak employed over 80,000 people, a larger staff than the pharaoh himself. So what did the pharaoh do? Akhenaten staged a divine coup. He broke up the priesthoods of all the other gods and declared his god, the sun disk Aten, was the one true God. Now, he wasn't only the one true God of the Egyptians, but all four known races of mankind: the Egyptians, the Libyans, the Asiatics, aka anyone east of Egypt, and the blacks: Nubians, Nehesu, Punt, Kush, all to the south. Aten had created all the human beings, and he took care of all of them. But despite the potential for a truly world-shaking change, almost 2 millennia before the fact, there would be no sweeping religious and cultural breakthrough. And the king and the god had actually become one and the same, so that when Akhenaten died, he took his sun god with him. Later generations regarded him as a heretic, and his name was obliterated, and the temples he built to Aten were destroyed. His son, Tutankhamenon, changed his name to Tutankhamun. We know him as King Tut. The story of the world's first real monotheists takes place centuries later in a wilderness to the northeast of Egypt, where an ordinary guy suddenly encounters a brilliant, shining vision, and then the god of his fathers appears and makes himself known, startling him with the news that he's been giving a mission to deliver his people from their oppressors and to lead them to the worship of the one true God. Now, there's no burning bush in this story, because this story takes place far, far to the northeast of Egypt and of Israel, because this is not the story of Moses. The prophet in this story is a pagan priest in ancient Iran called Zarathustra, who the Greeks would later call Zoroaster. And his revelation is the debut of the first major monotheistic religion and one of the world's most influential faiths. Its doctrines, beliefs, and rituals go on to influence virtually every other major world religion, including Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And though many people have never heard of it, this faith even survives today: Zoroastrianism. For 2 centuries, Judah was part of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, and the Jews of the diaspora were also living within the empire, often employed by wealthy Zoroastrians as household servants, business agents, and scribes. So in such an environment, it would have been it would have been very easy to learn and embrace the Zoroastrian doctrines, and given the circumstances, very hard to avoid picking up doctrines. Christians seem to have a harder time seeing these these similarities, or at least accepting them. And some apologists insist that the famously monotheistic Jews would never stoop to adopt theological ideas from foreign cultures and religions, which is a dubious premise for starters. History doesn't support it. But let me throw a few at you and you tell me. For instance, the afterlife, heaven and hell. For the pre exilic Hebrews, Yahweh and his host lived up in heaven. Not you, not anybody else. After death, mere mortals like us, good and bad alike, all went to the same place, this gloomy underworld world called Sheol. Um, the idea of a physical resurrection was also a fundamental Zoroastrian doctrine, but the Old Testament lacks any reference to the idea until after the Jews became exposed to Zoroastrianism. The earliest mention comes from the author of Ezekiel, who came up with the idea only late in his career after 12 years of captivity in Babylon, according to Ezekiel 33:21. It's also no surprise that the three Abrahamic faiths share so many angels, since angels and demons are deeply indebted to Zoroastrian angelology and demonology. Um, good versus evil itself. In Zoroastrianism, there was a supreme god of good, Ahura Mazda or Mazd. Fun fact: the Japanese car company Mazda is named after Ahura Mazda. Um, they had a good god and a god of evil, Ahriman. But the ancient Israelites had no concept of their God being forced to fight against some diabolical evil twin headquartered in the netherworld. Um, in Job and in Zechariah, where our translations of the Bible say Satan, the original Hebrew explicitly calls this figure the adversary, Hasatan, and he is one of the sons of Elohim, a full-fledged member of God's own heavenly court. If you've read the book of Job, you know that already. It never occurred to the Hebrews to blame anybody else but God for wickedness, plagues, pestilence, famine, or other disasters, since their God dealt out all that smiting himself. And in Isaiah 45:7, he says as much: I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And this verse is a direct response to Zoroastrian dogma. They also have an Adam and Eve in Zoroastrianism, Masha and Mashana, the original parents of humanity, who also fell victim to sin and were also punished. And scholars have noticed that elements in the Babylonian rabbinic story of Adam and Eve, such as covering themselves with fig leaves, suggest that the rabbis creatively reworked and expanded on themes found in the Zoroastrian and Manichaean creation myths. Oh. And those are just the most obvious and hard to deny commonalities. There are others that are between Zoroastrian, Christian, Islam that would require a special kind of stubbornness to deny. And some still come later, so it's not clear if they're borrowings or if these all were developed in tandem with one another. Things like the apocalypse, a battle of good and evil, a future Messiah born of a virgin, coming to earth to bring about a resurrection of the dead and a final judgment and an apocalyptic end of the world. With evil destroyed, the righteous would live in a new paradise. And it's funny, when Jesus says to the thief crucified next to him, "You'll be with me together in paradise." Paradise is a Persian word from Zoroastrianism. So the hits just keep on coming when it comes to that. Now, if Ahura Mazda reminds you of Lot of Jehovah, you're not alone, and neither is Ahura Mazda, because there was nothing inevitable about Yahweh becoming the one true God. Playing historical what if is a fun game, because in the book I talk about all the other divine runners up who also may have gone on to become the world's reigning monotheistic god, like Aten, like Asher, Marduk, Shiva, Vishnu, and there are several others as well. And still, for my money, probably the closest rival for monotheism would have been Persia's own god, Ahura Mazda, because often the language and titles used to describe Yahweh, God of heaven, etc., apply just as well and probably applied originally to the Zoroastrian god. And again, it's always convenient if you're encouraging the idea that you and all your subject peoples are really just worshiping the same god. Zoroastrianism seems to have been specifically cultivated under Cyrus or perhaps Darius to be the official national religion of the new Persian Empire. Their priestly elite took elements of Persia's own long-standing native polytheism, and like bonsai practitioners, lovingly and carefully pruned down that unruly pantheon down to a more manageable official state monotheism, in the very same way that Jewish religious elites returning from exile did with theirs. In fact, it's no stretch to wonder if here too the creators of Zoroastrianism set an example for the creators of Yahwism to follow. I say here in the slideshow, there's much more we could be talking about, but let's open it up for Q&A because I feel like I've been yakking sans slides long enough. Um, and
No,
it's more fun to hear from you guys anyway.
I love it. Yeah, that was great. People were enjoying some of the images going along with that evolutionary history, which was great. That was a really good, quick overview.
And again, this is just a very quick and dirty overview of the books. There's 3 of them that go into much
Yeah.
more detail. Yeah, so much. We could be talking about any one of these aspects all night long.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. And I think we have a chance to get into that with some of the questions. So, yeah, absolutely. Let's go to those. And I'm also going to put the link again in the chat for your book series. It's a book series, but
the book series, this
yes,
particular book is actually 3 volumes. And I'm working
yes.
on the audiobook as we speak. I've recorded the first part of book 1, and hopefully in January I'll get more of that banged out and get it out there as soon as possible.
Oh, so you're reading the books
I'm reading the
for.
book. Yeah.
Uh, oh, I cannot wait.
Yay.
Yes. Yes, okay, absolutely. Oh, and okay, we've got a bunch of questions, and Dr. Ray does get first crack at
Woo.
questions. So, Daryl, come on.
Well, I wasn't trying to jump line or anything. I just thought the concept of henotheism was a step you skipped, even though, I mean, you know about it.
Yeah.
And
Basically,
yeah,
henotheism is the idea that, oh, there's more than one God, but we just worship this one. And there's also different stages of that. There's ones like, well, yeah, there's different gods, but this is our God. And again, we can go. There's lots more to be said about that. But it's just the point of that being, it's not a straight shot from polytheism to monotheism. There's all these, a whole spectrum of things in between, and it seems to have gone back and forth even in Judea and Israel. Um,
Yeah. And that's a really interesting distinction though, too, that isn't something we necessarily think of, the idea of there being only one God versus the belief that there is more than one, but we're just selecting one.
right, right. He's
That's
our God, and we belong to Him. So
Do you think
yeah.
that's reflected in the commandment, thou shalt have no God, before
I
me?
absolutely I do.
yeah.
Absolutely. And the whole idea that he's a jealous God,
Mhm.
was he jealous of nothing? No, he's jealous because there's other gods out there.
Well, I've heard the apologetic that it just means, well, you're making up other gods and you shouldn't put them in front of me. So I'm just
Right. But that's not
wondering.
what he says, is it?
Yeah,
That's the
no.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's not really the story too.
Oh,
In some
no.
of the Old Testament stories, you have these like competitions. I can't remember if this is in Exodus or where it is, but there was where they're competing with the other gods and
With Baal,
the
that is that famous
priests.
one on Mount
Yes.
Carmel where all the Baal priests, and
Yes.
like his God, and it's such a perfect Bible story because it's so obviously crap. It's like, and God's no, pour water on it, yeah, and it's like, and of course everything goes exactly how he says, and the snaky little Baal priest, oh, let's just kill them all, it's just a perfect
Well,
little.
I don't know
uh,
that one,
Yeah.
but the one that I am familiar with is the one where Moses appears
oh
before
yeah,
the Pharaoh
and
and
he out tricks all the Pharaoh's magicians. Yeah.
yeah, but they don't like say they're magicians. So like they're
Yeah.
what are they doing? Like where are they getting
Right.
their powers from?
Right.
Like is that not the Egyptian gods doing their thing?
Oh, it's funny. There's a one point in the Bible in the Old Testament where the Israelites are laying siege to a castle, and the king sacrifices his firstborn son to Chemosh, and it works, and they rout the Egyptians, and it's like, you know,
Yeah.
damn it,
Wait a
we would have
minute.
won if he hadn't pulled that dirty trick. Yeah, and this is still in the book. That's what kills me. It's like they had every chance to write what they wanted to, and they left that story in. Um,
Yeah,
Another thing that comes up
exactly.
in the book, I'm not sure if it's in book 2 or volume 1 or volume 2, but I talk about all the other gods that the ancient Israelites and Judeans had, and that are still in the Bible. It's like when this Bible verse is, this psalm is talking about this, well, that's actually talking about Baal, or it's actually talking about the moon, or the story of Samson is a story of a sun god, and everything, all these little hints in the story point to that he's actually a sun god, and not a judge of Israel. I mean,
Yes,
he acts
it's
more like Conan the Barbarian than a judge anyway. He's too busy whoring and murdering to actually do any judging. And I'm
it
not even
does get
exaggerating.
wild.
That's literally what he's doing in the Bible. Yeah, murdering
Yes,
people and whoring. Yeah,
yes, I cannot wait for your sex and violence in the Bible book because, like, I remember reading the Old Testament as, like, a young teen thinking, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I need to be reading my Bible," and getting
ah!
into Judges, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
this got a little wild.
yeah,
Was not expecting all of that."
yeah. Well, it's so funny if you've read the Brick Bible, that uh, uh, the Lego version of the Bible,
Yes.
that is given, sold, and marketed to Christians, and they do it, and then they find out an atheist trans woman wrote it, and they're like, "Ah!" And it's like, but they just put in the things that the Bible says. They didn't make anything up. They just tell the story the way the Bible tells the story. It's like, oh no, we can't have this told to our kids.
Yeah.
There's Philistine foreskins and people having sex, murder.
Like,
Yeah,
well, that's what's in there. Have you read it?
it's in there.
I
There you
I
go.
had a interesting conversation with a street proselytizer one time who was encouraging me to read the Bible, and I finally asked her, "Hey, have you read that book?" And she said, "Well, no, it's really long. Obviously, I couldn't have read the whole entire thing." I said, "I think
Oh
you
my
should
god,
start.
this
Start
is
with
this.
Genesis.
Yeah,
Get back
I
to me. Come to
I do not
recovering from
know
religion
I don't,
afterwards."
every atheist I know has read more of the Bible than every Christian I know. I'm almost to a yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, at some point, once you've read enough of it, especially the Old Testament, it's hard to then go back and think of that as one, literally true, and two,
right,
something to be praised. That's
right,
kind of a
right.
leap.
Let alone written by one overarching Holy Spirit that guided it all with this one central message. It's like, dude, even the same books don't even have the same point of view in them. Yeah.
No, it'll tell the same story, just right again 2 chapters
Oh,
later,
thank
but
you,
a
thank
retelling of
you,
it in a different
thank
way. Like,
you. Oh, thank you. Yeah,
So,
don't get me
so,
started.
so
Don't get me
historically,
started.
what's the reason for that? That always bugged me. This multiple creation right after
Yeah,
one after the other. Why they did put the Bible together essentially at some committee,
exactly.
right? So how did they not pay attention to that? I don't understand
Well,
it.
they did it deliberately, and I think the reason they did was because they had this story over here and this story here, and they wanted to have both because they were all scripture. They were all holy, and it's like we don't know which one's the most holy. We better have all of them. Um,
mhm,
and you see that also in the New Testament too. You see the same stories with the story of Abraham. You see all these stories that happened to Abraham. They also happen a generation later and a generation after that. Um, there's just it's such a collage of different things that are thrown together. Um, and sometimes they manage to harmonize them more or less, and sometimes they don't even bother. Sometimes they don't even bother. Um, and there's stuff that sticks out like a sore thumb, and the rabbis themselves forgot what it was all about or where it came from, and
mhm.
they have a hell of a time trying to explain it now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I imagine something that comes up a lot as you're studying kind of the history of religions, is that we tend to think that the way we believe is the way it's been for a long time. And oh,
right,
my parents taught me this and my grandparents taught me this. This must be a long-standing tradition. For example,
right,
believing that the Bible is the literal truth and is the actual historical record of what happened. But that's
right,
not always been the way people thought of that text, right?
right. And in fact, look, when you talk about the New Testament, for example, there's all these stories about Jesus that it's obvious whoever wrote these stories, it's an allegory for things in the Hebrew scriptures. There's things like, and I talk about this in Nailed, I talk about this in Jesus Mything in Action, things like, for instance, his trial under Pilate makes no sense whatsoever. Nothing in that story makes any sense historically, logically, story logic. but it makes all perfect sense if it's an allegory for Yom Kippur. And you can multiply that any number of times. There's to go off, it's not just Christianity and Judaism, Mithraism. One of the things we know about Mithra is from the Mithraic temples that there was this whole business about Mithra killing the bull, and there was a scorpion there and a crow over here, and it's like it's very very obvious, and they've broken this down what this really meant. It's a story about this astronomical, not astrological, but astronomical phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes. For us, it's just this interesting thing. It means the North Pole is kind of shifting on its axis because we have a wobbly planet. It's not perfect. So every, 20,000 years or whatever, it changes. Not a big deal unless you think your planet is the center of the entire universe. And that means the entire universe is spinning in this new direction. And so they told this story in Mithraism. And so to explain that, and like the priests knew we're talking about this, but the other people just knew it was a nice story about Mithra and the bull. And this is the same thing we get with early Christian writers. They know, and because we have early Christian writers say about this, this makes no sense literally. It'd be crazy to think that, but it's spiritual and allegorical to say that, he cursed a fig tree because it was out of season, because we're not really talking about a fig tree. He wasn't so stupid that he knew what fig trees weren't out of stupid. He's talking about rejection of this. And there's all these layers that they expect their educated readers to know what they're really talking about. But for the slaves, for the women, for the kids, it's just a nice, fun story to lock in. At some point, Christianity flipped, and the tail started wagging the dog. And once you have somebody writing the Gospels, all of a sudden, people start taking the Gospels literally, and people start arguing, "Oh no, it's really all happened," even though the stories aren't the same story. And they what's that Flanders quote from The Simpsons? I believe in all the parts of the Bible, even the parts that disagree with each other.
That was an excellent quote. Yeah. And it kind of makes sense too, given that, we're far enough removed from the time and the place in which these were
Yeah.
written, that most random people today who are going to pick up a Bible and read it are not going to be familiar with the literary references that it's making,
Right.
or the cultural references that are going on. We wouldn't have any context for that. So
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
makes sense that we're missing all of the actual references that were probably intended.
And it's so ironic to have Christians, when they get defensive with you and you're talking about them, say, "Oh, you're taking that verse out of context." Just say, "Okay, but what is the context?" I
Yeah,
have
tell me
never
more.
had a Christian be able to tell me what the context is. I can tell them what the
No,
context is. They cannot tell me what the context is.
no. The
But it's
answer is
like,
always, well, you just need to study your Bible more. Well,
yeah, yeah. But
okay.
fun fact, if any Christian tells you you're taking out of context, immediately ask them, "Oh, please tell me what the context is."
Yeah.
And watch them go,
Tell me more.
well, it's a fun game.
I
It's a
love
very
it.
fun game. Yeah.
So, speaking of the context, and while we're on this topic, we had several people ask questions about this idea of there being multiple gods kind of referenced in the Bible, like we were
Yeah.
talking about. But why is it, do you think, that, for example, the monotheistic religions today, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, came to believe that their God was the only one true
Right.
God, even though
Right.
there are others that are mentioned?
Um, in book one, I talk about how, tell me what you think about God, and I'll tell you what level your society is at. And it's kind of a function of that. As you get these local gods becoming pantheons, as you join up with your neighbors, um, and then as you start collecting more, as empires start, capturing Persians, capturing Egyptians, capturing, all these different languages, cultures, religions. You need a God that's a God of all of them. There's that famous verse in the Bible, "Oh, well, our God's a hill God, and those guys were on the plains had iron chariots. We couldn't beat them." But you need a God who's bigger than all that. I love that scene in the Conan movie where he says, "Oh, my sky god shits on your hill god, Crom." And it's the same thing. The God he not only gets bigger and more transcendent above it all, but he becomes more universal. He's the God of everybody. He created everything and everybody, and all the other gods are just aspects of him, or agents of him, or angels of him. And a lot of our angels, quote unquote, are gods that got demoted down to that level. Um, so, and in book 1, I also talk about all the other gods that were in Israel and Judah. And not only did they have lots of different gods, but they had lots of different Yahwehs. There was Yahweh of over here and Yahweh of over there. And the difference between Baal and El and Yahweh, these Canaanite gods, gets very slippery really fast. And that's not even talking about the Mrs. gods, the goddesses that his consort Asherah or Astarte or Ishtar, it all gets very muddled very fast, and it's hard to parse them out. Those golden bulls that they worshipped, yeah, it's all this rich stew, melting pot of gods that ancient Israel and Judah is just dripping in.
Did you know that we had Elle make a personal appearance on one of our RfRx shows?
What? I did not know that.
Mr. Deity, who calls himself
Oh,
Elle
yeah.
occasionally.
I love Mr. Deity.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, what else do we have, Rob?
Wow, we got more questions than we normally get at this point. Where do I?
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Okay. Do you think plagiarism played a role in the creation of one or more of the monotheistic religions?
I mean, that's a tricky and loaded question. I mean, basically, yes. I think our Judaism, our earliest form of Judaism, didn't start until after the Babylonian exile, because it was encouraged and fostered by the same guys who created Zoroastrianism, the Persian religion. Like Judaism, Zoroastrianism came out of earlier pantheon of Indo-European gods, or Indo-Aryan gods, I should say. And our Jehovah, when you get to the point where the Bible's being written, the Jehovah's they're writing about is a lot like Ahura Mazda. So much so that, I mean, Zoroastrian is clearly the granddaddy of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And they're all cross-pollinating with each other, all stealing and borrowing ideas from each other and from other older religions. And it's fascinating when you come across something and realize, oh, that comes from this thing over here, this religion way over there. Christianity itself seems to have begun as a Jewish version of the Hellenistic mystery faiths. This religious stage where suddenly, okay, the old gods on Olympus, that pantheon, that idea is worn out and tired. The new sexy idea is a personal savior who lives in your heart. And that comes straight out of these Hellenistic mystery faiths. And in fact, Paul uses lots of the same vocabulary as the mystery faiths. There's lots of points in the New Testament where they seem to be pointing out, oh, look, I'm showing you a mystery. Here's the mystery, and acting in other, just like a mystery faith, so much that it's very hard for me to accept anybody who tries to tell me that mystery faiths don't have anything to do with Christianity.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If I go down too many rabbit holes, just know that I'm biting my tongue to keep talking for another 20 minutes on every single question you ask.
Oh, we've got plenty of
We
questions.
got plenty. We have.
Yeah.
That's what I want to get to all the questions, so I don't want to go too deep in the weeds with it.
Okay, I have one that was asked at
Yeah.
at New York City Skepticamp a few weeks ago. Because there was a treatise on how the pyramids were built. Actually built. So here's a question.
Yes.
What do you think of Dr. Daniel Jackson's thesis about the Egyptian gods using the pyramids as landing pads for their spacecraft?
Yeah, I think that's the one true faith, is that the chariots of the gods came down and Battlestar Galactica, not the new one, but the 1971 had it all right, that the Egyptians and the Toltecs and the Mayas were actually space gods from.
Are you not a fan? Are you not a fan of Stargate's universe?
And them too. Yes, absolutely. All these things are clearly true.
Yeah, that I love the beginning of it, because Dr. Jackson was like the odd man out, and he's the one who's preaching that aliens built the pyramids and and he's a crazy nut, and then it turns out he was right.
Well, it's actually fascinating to me to see when you actually have like engineers and archaeologists talk about how they really did it. Like, because we
Yeah.
have the tax records of the guys who wrote it,
Yep.
who built it. You know, they were very proud that they were on the work gangs of that.
Mhm.
In Peru, you know, they talk about those stone, that cyclopean architecture that fits like jigsaw puzzles, just crazy accurate, and you can't even slide a razor blade in them. And then they went to the local Indians there and showed how they take river rocks, and that's how they bang them into perfectly flat things. It's not laser cut. It's they take river rocks and blow it away, and they do it by hand, and it's just incredibly amount of tedious handmade work does it, and I'm blown away uh, by how simple it is when you actually know the secret. You know.
Yeah, so the presentation on building the pyramids, like, what it wasn't conclusive, but basically, and it wasn't, he's not an archaeologist, but he has studied this for like 30 years, and he gave a lot of good information from books he's read on the subject. Basically, I can't tell you how they built them, but these are all the possibilities. There are many
Ah,
different possibilities, and none of them include aliens.
Well, right, and we have a long history of other types of pyramid structures before we got to the
sure,
pyramids of Giza that
sure.
we're all
Yeah,
familiar with that are so
Right,
magnificent. We can
right.
see how the architectural techniques advanced and
yes,
developed and where they had mistakes
Yeah.
previously and ones that collapsed and then they improved their technique. It didn't just appear out of
exactly.
nowhere.
That is such a good point, and you can expand that example to everything. Because religion, the evolution of religion, makes me not take any one of them seriously when you see where they come from. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah,
And all you have to do is look for it. There has to be a willful ignorance at some
yeah,
point to say, well, we just have no idea how
yeah,
these
right.
could have possibly been
Well,
built. Like,
and
really,
it's
did you
like
try to find out even a little bit at all?
And it's like early Mormonism. It's so fucking racist. So like, these savages couldn't have done it. Obviously, there were white people here back in the day, you know. And it's same
Yes.
with Egypt, same with Polynesia, same with you fill in the blanks for all of them. It's like, you know,
It's always that. No one's ever wondering if aliens built the Colosseum in Rome for some
right,
reason. I don't
right,
know why.
right. Don't get me started. Ugh. Next question.
Yes. Okay, moving on. So, okay, here's a fun one. Um, Out of all of the deities that you have learned about, is there one that even though you know doesn't exist, that you still think is pretty cool?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of them, but for every god that I think is kind of cool, that religion I think is cool, it also horrifies me. So it's like all those religions. There's all these debates like, oh well, religion was good because it provided this, this, this. You know, Karen Armstrong says, oh, our religions nurtured us. It's like, well, Karen, did they nurture us or do we nurture them? Because you know, if you go to Aztec land, you know, they feed on blood and pain, and they need lots of it. And it's Polynesia. It's horrifying, and I have no doubt that every single one of our cultures began just horrifyingly wrong about things and their respect for human life. And again, everybody else, they weren't human. Only our tribe, only our family is human. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we see how we are.
Yes. Yeah.
Imagine, how this is how people act. Now imagine that with, less rules and structures in place to
Yeah.
regulate our
Yep.
behavior. It's
Yep.
probably not
Yep.
awesome.
Not that awesome. Yep. Exactly.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, I'll throw in an answer here just so we have an answer. I kind of think Anubis is pretty cool, but also that's also a dark, kind of spooky one too.
Yeah.
But looks like
Yeah.
a dog, kind of fun.
I mean, I love
Um,
mythology in general. There's some really cool mythology out there. Um,
yeah,
but yeah.
but yeah, no, I agree. It's a good point. It's kind of dark and creepy when you think about it too hard.
When you start killing people, your religions aren't cute anymore, you know, and there's
That's fair.
very, very few that don't take that step, you know, it seems like.
Fair point. All right. We tried to have a fun question. Rob, try again.
Okay,
Nice, Rob.
this one should be fun.
Okay, this time for
What
sure.
is your opinion? What is the most ridiculous apologetic excuse?
Oh my goodness. Well, there were I think it's called diabolical mimicry, and it was the argument that, oh well, the devil obviously read the Old Testament and read the prophecies, and so he created all these fake Christianities centuries before Christianity came about. Um, I think that's probably my favorite as far as lame ass excuses,
I have never heard that one.
C.S. Lewis said, "Oh, with Christianity, it was myth made fact." It's like, Clive, listen to what you're saying. Come on, come on, go back to Narnia. Ugh.
Wow. Yeah, that's a new one on me too.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Okay, here's one that I know we can get you going on for several minutes, if not the next hour, but we'll try and cut the answer to this short of, 30 more minutes. Uh, is there any evidence for Jesus from even a secular standpoint as a historical figure?
Well, let me start my 19-point answer by saying this. Um, 25 years ago, it never even crossed my mind to question that there was a real guy named Jesus, because why would anyone think that? Of course there was. Wasn't until I started reading the Gospels and realizing, well, this clearly is not talking about the same guy. This is a different guy. This is a different story. I wonder which one's giving us the real story about Jesus. And once you start trying to parse the real parts of the Gospels against the clearly made up bullshit of the Gospels, as I say in Nailed, once you start pulling on that thread, pretty soon you have no sweater. Um, yeah, the short answer is read Nailed and then read Jesus Mything in Action, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll talk. But at this point, I just don't even I don't even see how we're not, as a society, past, at least a secular society, past the idea of giving him a free ride. Um, and one thing about this new book is it's not just Jesus. All the top 10 world religions seem to be 100% made up, their founder figures. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we would still be atheists even if there had been a real guy preaching reincarnation as Buddha, or preaching the gospel according to Jesus. But that's not where our evidence takes us. That's not what it looks like the closer we look. Um, and yeah, and I also love what Robert Price said. It's like, for all intents and purposes, even if there had been a real Jesus, there's not one anymore, because everything we think we know about that guy comes from people who are writing decades, if not generations after the fact, about somebody who never exactly actually lived at all. Um, but
Yeah.
in most cases, I don't even think there's that kernel of truth that got exaggerated, or conflation of multiple guys. It's like, no, I think they knew what they were doing. They were starting out to create a religion. Full stop. Um,
Hmm.
So in a
Yeah.
previous talk, and maybe it was yours or someone else
mm,
was talking about this, and I had never heard this before, that there's some doubt that Muhammad actually existed.
yeah, this is the thing. This is the thing. Um, when you look at early Islam, clearly the guy they're saying started their religion did not start their religion. If there was anything remotely like him, it was a minor war chief, not a religious figure at all. And we don't what we recognize as Islam, we wouldn't see for like 60 to 80 years after the supposed start of the religion. And everything we're learning, and this is one of those crazy things that in the last 2 or 3 years has blown my mind. It's like, oh nope, gotta write this book over here. Is that the story about Mecca, Medina, his whole clan, the Quraysh. It's like all this stuff. Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That couldn't have happened. That couldn't have happened. It's like there's no way Muhammad existed. Full stop. Period. Um,
Next, you're
Full
going to
stop.
tell me that he didn't fly up into the sky on a winged horse.
I mean that's as I'm not even saying there was a guy who was mistaken about all those things. Like there wasn't even a dude. There wasn't even a dude. That should be the title of my next book. There wasn't even a dude. Yeah, full stop. Yeah,
I love that. I would buy that book.
yeah. I should just
Amazing.
rename my whole library that. Yeah,
There wasn't even a dude. I
yeah.
love that.
Well,
And
Early
that
Doherty
was
has Jesus, neither God nor man, which I think that nails it down pretty well too.
ooh,
Yeah,
yeah, that's pretty good too. I like that.
yeah,
But that was an interesting point though that I hadn't really thought about before. I think it was like 2 times ago when you came on. I hadn't thought about it that way before, in the sense that whether or not there was a person named Jesus at some point, or whatever the translation pronunciation would have been,
sure.
um i- the version of that person that we have in our minds as
Yeah,
the Jesus of the Bible is probably so far removed as to be unrecognizable from whoever that person may or may not have even been.
I'm glad you said that, because that made me think of something earlier. When I was doing a review of a Bart Ehrman debate between him and I forget Craig Evans, I think it was. Um, it was, can we trust the New Testament on the historical Jesus? Now Bart Ehrman, who I love, famously says, "Oh, of course there was a Jesus." Secular, everything. He's done more to debunk Jesus than anybody else, but he says, "Oh yeah, there was a guy named Jesus." But when you ask him, and what do we get from the New Testament we can trust about Jesus? It felt like I was having that debate because we were exactly on the same page. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's an interesting way of framing the question though, like, did Jesus exist? Well, what do you mean by Jesus? If it's the person you have in your mind from going to Sunday school, then maybe we can all agree no.
Very
and
pale
that's
skin with blue eyes and blonde hair. That guy.
yeah. Well, yeah, there's that. But it's also funny when Christians say they roll their eyes and say, "Oh no, every historian agrees there was a Jesus." Well, yeah, but all the secular historians believe in a Jesus who debunks your Jesus, and you debunk the Mormon Jesus, and you debunk the Catholic Jesus. It's like that consensus, so-called consensus, falls apart almost instantly. And even when you just talk
Mhm.
about secular historians, it falls apart almost instantly as soon as you ask them, "Well, what do we know about Jesus, and what do we think he did?" "Well, he was a boy, and we know he died, and we know." It's like the laundry list just gets slower, lower and lower, and littler shrinks away. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting distinction to make though. It's almost like people get busy arguing in the weeds about like, well, was there a person? Yeah, but it, if a
What's our
person named
evidence?
Jesus existed,
What's
what's
our evidence for it?
the
And
point?
if that's true, why do we have evidence for all these other kinds of Jesuses? Like Paul saying, "Oh, people teaching another gospel, another Christ," and but that's not our Christ. Boo! We don't like them. Don't take their Lord's Supper. No, boo! That's demons. Take our Lord's Supper.
Oh,
It's
since you
Yeah.
mentioned Paul, we have a
yeah,
question about Paul.
Yeah.
yeah.
Who do you think first invented, air quotes, Christianity as a strain of Judaism, Paul or someone else?
Someone else. I mean, even Paul would have said that. But that said, I mean, clearly Christianity existed before Paul. But it is weird that out of that whole first century, we hear basically from one dude, Paul. And even though half the stuff attributed to him is forgery, in fact, the majority of things attributed to him is forgery. That's the name that gets attached to them. So it's really bizarre. It's like, where are the rest of the Christians? Where's Apollos of Alexandria who you talk about? Where's these other apostles you talk about? Because when Paul talks about apostles like himself, he's not talking about the 12 apostles, Jesus' disciples. He never uses the word disciples in any context ever, or implies that Jesus had 12 of them. Um, or that any of the Jerusalem church leaders who he hates had any better relationship to Jesus than he had, let alone be related to him or served under him. Um, and I lost my train of thought. Boom, where I was going with that. But it's crazy making when you see quickly how quickly the whole Paul thing falls apart. But it's so weird that this one dude is our only thing. It's like, where's the rest of Christianity for the first century? There's so much we don't know about all the different Christianities that
So
were floating around back then.
somebody just wrote in the chat, and I've never heard this one before. Is there's doubt that Paul existed?
And I've heard that before, but in book 2, I talk about the good reasons we have for thinking Jesus didn't exist, and the good reasons we have for thinking Paul did exist. Part of the problem is that there's more than one Paul. There's 4 Pauls just in the Bible alone. And we only like one of them, and that's Luke's Paul. The super Paul who does all the miracles and gets out of trouble and has exciting prison escapes and all that. But the real Paul, who's like bitchy all the time and constantly swearing he's not lying and doesn't seem to like girls very much, that Paul we don't like. That seems to be the real Paul.
Oh,
Um,
the one who told women to be silent in church?
Fun fact, he never said that. That's written by one of the fake Pauls, the guy
Oh,
who wrote Timothy and Titus. Um, I mean, Paul liked women as far as like the rich church ladies who sponsored his church, but he didn't like women like, don't get married to a silly girl. Like, why would you do something like that? Don't worry about it. But I mean, I guess it's better to, marry than burn, I guess. But I wish all men were like me, perfectly able to withstand the temptation of women. Yeah.
I always picked up on that too and thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, Paul doesn't like women. Like,
Yeah.
Paul doesn't like women.
No, he really does not like that. He loves Timothy. He loves Barnabas. He loves all his pals. But yeah. I'll be talking about that in the Sex and Violence in the Bible book. It's a chapter called "There's Something About Paul."
Oh,
And
man.
uh,
Oh,
I
man.
love it. Okay, we have so many questions, and we're gonna get to some more of them.
all
Eh,
right.
Okay, we're gonna go into this one's a very specific question.
Hmm.
And I think this may pertain potentially to one of the poll questions, which we'll do the answers
Oh,
to at the end. But
okay.
and I don't know if it does or not because my archaeological knowledge on this period and area of the world is limited. But the question is, how much of Canaanite myth has
Hmm.
survived?
Hmm.
And if we view Judaism as a syncretic merging of Zoroastrianism with the Canaanite worship of El/Yahweh, are there pieces that we can trace distinctly back to the Canaanite traditions?
Yes, 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 yes. All the yeses. Syncretism is the word when we're talking about all religion, but it's but no more so than Old Testament and Christianity and all. Um, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to answer that question. For instance, let's take just the story of Moses. The first 5 books of the Bible are called the Pentateuch. They're all supposedly written by Moses, and for at least 100 years, I think more or less 150 years, we've known about books like this Babylonian history of Babylon by a guy named Berosus. And we've known about this Egyptian history of Egypt by a guy named Manetho. And we know that they've mentioned things like, things that happen in Genesis or things that happen in the Moses story. And we've always thought they were been reacting to our well-known stories. Well, Russell Gamerkin has pointed out that, we actually don't have any mention of any of these things before they write this book in the year of, in the 3rd century BCE. And in fact, it looks an awful lot like our stories in Genesis aren't just taken from Mesopotamian, Canaanite, Syrian, East Semitic, West Semitic mythology, but it's taken from Berosus's version of that mythology in his book he wrote in the year 280 or so, probably about 10 years before those books were written in the year 273 or 272 BCE in Alexandria, Egypt, which we were able to pinpoint the time and the place that accurately. Same with Moses. It's like not only do we know no one was talking about Moses before the 4th century BCE, but we know when this Moses character appeared, it wasn't in our Bibles, it was in a Greek writer, and he inspired Manetho, this Egyptian, to write his story of Moses. Our story of Moses is clearly taken from that story because it responds, and it's like anything in that story the Jews don't look good, it fixes in our version of our story. So it's clear that these are taken directly and dependent on these books that were written again around the year 285, the 3rd century, not the 14th or 16th century BC, but the 3rd century. At the same time, there's a archaeologist in Tel Aviv, Jonathan Adler, who just about a little over 2 years ago dropped this bombshell of archaeology saying, oh, fun fact, archaeologically, we have no evidence whatsoever for Judaism's practices before the mid-2nd century. Maybe it was before that, but we have no evidence whatsoever for it, which perfectly tracks with what Russell Gamerkin is saying, that clearly in the 5th century or the 7th century, these things did not exist yet. These stories had not been written yet. Our versions of them, I should say. There's older nuggets of things like the Samson story. There's little verses like in Numbers, which we found versions of. But for instance, it doesn't necessarily, the verses that we find aren't necessarily talking about our Yahweh. When it says, the Lord does this, it's really saying Elohim, which means the gods bless you and keep you. It's like we have Jewish writings from a place called Elephantine. We have over a century of writings from this place called Elephantine, which was a Jewish colony. And I talk about this a great deal in the book because it blows my mind so much to hear Jews saying things like, may the gods bless you, my brothers, and having a temple that has 5 gods, Yahweh, Mrs. Yahweh, and 3 other dudes, at least, if not more. And they're not some weird spin-off mutant version of Yahweh, Jews. They're in close contact with the temple in Jerusalem at a time when there's only supposed to be one temple. And I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'm going down because there's just so much to talk about. And talking about what was happening in the temple of Jerusalem, when Ezekiel's and Isaiah, guys like that, are complaining about, oh yeah, the women are crying for Tammuz, the Persian god. The men are worshiping the sun. We've got these solar sun chariot horses in there. It's like, this is in your own book. It's telling us this is not something atheists are making up. Their archaeologists are finding. 7th century BCE, the #1 archaeological find in Israel and Judah. Guess what it is? Anybody?
Ooh.
Female goddess figurines. Overwhelming. We have hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. Yeah.
Yep.
Mrs. Yahweh.
Mrs. Yeah. Asher.
I'm still stuck on Mrs. Yahweh. I love it.
Yeah.
That's going crazy in the chat.
Yeah. And
I
again,
want one of
the
your
more than
books
one
needs
Yahweh.
to be from her perspective.
Yeah. And it's funny things like some of the prophets, we don't really know. We only have like the later rabbis' word on it that these are talking about our Lord, Yahweh, not Lord Baal or El, Israel, Daniel. All these L's keep popping up because, as we see here in the Moses story, oh yeah, in those days I wasn't called Yahweh. In those days I was called El. That Western Canaanite god. It's
How interesting.
it's very interesting. It's fascinating. Yeah, I feel like an oncologist of religion. It's not that I'm fascinated and I love religion. It's like, this is amazing, and look where this came from, and
And
So
can we get
I
rid of
I
it?
have a question. I'm going to interject here. It's not
Yeah.
on the list, but
Yeah.
do we have any understanding from writings of the times what percent of people in, say, let's go to Greek or Rome or Egypt, where they had the multitude of gods, which just seems ridiculous to me. How many people were atheists, essentially? How many people actually bought that there were all of these beings doing all of these specific things, driving the sun across the sky and making
there is a debate on, did the Greeks really believe in their own
Yeah,
god?
yeah.
And of course, famously in Roman times, the Christians were called atheists because they didn't believe in all the gods.
Yes, I heard that.
The irony is the levels just dogpiling each other so much I can't get over it. But yeah, that's a great question, and I think it also harkens back to that whole 2-tiered thing where it's like, well, the smart, educated people, they know what we're really talking about, but it's a good story for the plebes and the slaves and the women and the children.
Which makes the show we were talking about before, Chaos, really funny because the Greek pantheon is true. They're real.
Yeah.
They are real and interacting with humans, and they're on the news.
Yep, and they're on the news, and people really shouldn't worship them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got time for, I think, maybe 2 more questions,
All
and
right.
then so we'll have to choose our questions carefully. Let's
Choose
see.
wisely, Cara. Choose wisely.
Yes, I will choose
Oh, but
wisely.
I will say, if anybody does have questions that wakes them up at 2:00 in the morning, you can always shoot me an email, everybodylovesdave@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook, or these guys can all, the RFR
Yes.
can always get a hold of me.
We can do that. And also, do you want to stick around for the hangout?
Absolutely. I thought this was the hangout. Yes, absolutely.
We're still recording at this point, but
Fair enough.
yes, we'll go to the hangout here in a couple of minutes, and then people can just ask their questions to you directly, because we have so many that we're not going to get to. We are just full of questions tonight.
And here's the
People
thing.
always have questions on this
Even the
topic.
questions I'm answering tonight, there's more information in the books. That's why I write them,
Yeah.
because I can't keep it on my brain. I have to
Yep.
put it down somewhere.
Love it. Okay, all right, let's see. Let's do two more. Let's go with okay, I like this one because this is kind of getting at how do we decide that we know things or don't know things?
Right.
And so someone is asking, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek question, but I think it brings up an interesting point. They ask, if all deities are fictional versions, can we say that deities do not exist because fictional characters do not exist in reality? And it's kind of a gotcha question,
I
but it's
mean,
a legitimate question. What can
it's,
we say about whether deities do or do
yeah.
not exist based on what we know?
I mean, based on what we know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, I don't think any of them exist or ever did exist. And that there's reasons why we used to think they did exist, or at least pretend to ourselves that they existed. And people
Mhm,
still pretend they exist. It's a
mhm,
$1 billion business model for starters. And people, lock so much of their personality and their identity in it because they're
mhm,
encouraged to do so from a very young age.
mhm,
And a lot of people aren't reading anymore, or never did. The people who love the Bible, they don't always read the Bible. Um,
mhm,
Or
mhm.
they only
Oh,
read the selective
or they
parts
only read the
in
Bible
Bible
and not
study.
any other book. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What's
yes.
that phrase? Beware the man of who just has one book. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
I know what book
fair
you're talking
enough.
about.
Yep.
Hey, Gail Kitty.
Oh, more
You okay?
kitties are joining us. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob gets to ask the last question
Wow.
before
Okay.
we
Well,
go to
this
the
is going to ask
hangout.
David to put on his non-existent psychic hat.
Okay.
From
Ooh.
a historical point of view, how long will Christianity be relevant until it dies out like the other
Uh,
myths?
well, assuming that human civilization survives the next 4 to 8 years, which I'm not as certain about as I was, a month and a half ago, um, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I will say this: when I was working for Secular Student Alliance around 2013, I think it was, the poll numbers between the top three answers were openly religious, spiritual but not religious, and openly secular. And those numbers kept going down, and secular kept going up, up, up. And I don't know that those have changed. Um, Historically, at least as a couple years ago, it was the least religious generation in human history. So, I mean, there'll probably always be some kind of religion, and if not religion, there'll be some kind of crazy wacko woo woo stuff we need to watch out for. That's just not based in
That's a
reality.
little bit scary because, yes, the polls have shown, Pew did a poll about that, that as
Yep.
people step away from religion, they actually increase their other beliefs, their woo beliefs about things.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, they get more into astrology and things like that. There's got to
So
be
I
something else, and if it's not in
just
the Bible, it's something else.
right, right. But
Yep.
just from the atheists I know, sometimes there is like a way station. It's like, well, I went from Christianity
Mhm.
to pagan to this, and realized, this is all bullshit. So
Yeah,
Is
we see
Helen
that a
here? Is
lot.
Helen not here? Helen's not
Yeah,
here
no,
today.
Helen's having family time this week, but
Uh,
yes, she talks about that a lot
yeah,
too.
yeah,
About
she
that
was
is
a, she
a
was a Catholic, raised Catholic, and she
yes,
became a Wiccan high priestess.
yeah.
yes,
And
yeah.
honestly, if you just take Christianity alone or any
Huh.
fill in the blank religion, there's a huge spectrum just within that, and always have been.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and it's simply not the case that just because people aren't religious that they don't believe weird and
right.
wacky things that are not evidence based.
Yeah, and
People
they
are
can be just as
susceptible to
hateful and
that.
prejudiced as anybody else.
Hmm.
I mean, all these beliefs that we have, we all have to ask ourselves: is there good reason to believe what we believe? Um,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think it was, that theologian Niebuhr who said, "Religion tends to make good people better and bad people worse," which is probably
Ooh,
my favorite quote on religion ever.
I
Uh,
like that. I actually haven't heard that before, but that's really interesting.
yeah,
It
but
basically
again,
amplifies what you're already doing.
right. But I mean, atheists are not immune to stupid thinks and hateful
Mhm.
thought. So,
No, I think as soon as we start thinking we're immune to that is when we're really, really susceptible to getting sucked into some really bad ideas.
but the one thing I will say is that atheists, by and large, don't have bad reasons for believing the good things that we believe. Um,
Right.
and yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you don't
I had to
need to
think about that
lie
for a
to
minute.
some. We don't need to fool ourselves or tell lies to be good when there are already good reasons to be good.
Yes, exactly. And it can be a good model to go by to realize, hey, I realized I was believing something that didn't make any sense based on some rational principles or using logic or reason or critical thinking. And then the next step is let me go ahead and apply that same way of thinking to the other things that I'm believing and find more.
Yeah. I love what Matt Dillahunty says about I want to be less wrong. And it's like,
Yes.
it makes me wonder, what am I wrong about right now? Even as we sit here and speak, what am I wrong about? You know,
Right.
and
Right, because if we're not open to the idea that we might be wrong about something, we're basically saying, "I'm never gonna know more than I do right now today." And
and who does
I
that
sure
sound like?
hope that
Yes.
I
Yeah,
learn more things in my life than what I currently know.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also, as Matt says, the thing that's more important to him than atheism is his scientific skepticism, his approach to that, which brought him to his atheism.
Nice.
Right. Exactly. All right,
And
well,
as somebody told me once, humans are more important than ideas. I think I saw that
yes.
I don't remember where I heard that, but I sure love that.
Yes, that is a good one. I like that too. We used to have that in the background for RfRx episodes back when Eric was here. I love it. And we are still getting more questions coming in. So I think it's time to wrap up and move to the hangout so we can ask more questions. What do you say we do that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming, David. This has been great. And as always, has generated a ton of excellent conversation and lots of questions that we haven't even gotten through all of
Oh,
yet.
polls before we end it.
Yes, you're right. Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for reminding me. Okay. We'll do the poll results.
oh, right.
So here we go. At the beginning, we asked people, and David, tell us what the answers are here. First, we asked people which of these belief systems is older, and we had 13% of people chose Judaism, 57% chose Zoroastrianism, 21% Hinduism, and 4% each for Jainism and Buddhism. So, what's the answer?
Maybe 2, 3 years ago, I would have been one of those 4% saying Jainism is oldest. Turns out Zoroastrianism. In fact, Zoroastrianism turns out to be the mitochondrial Eve of all our major world religions, both East and West, which blew my mind.
Wow.
Did not know that 2.5 years
Ooh.
ago. But older than Buddhism, older than Hinduism, older than Jainism, way older than Judaism. I mean, Judaism is
So
directly.
all of those Christians who call the atheist experience and say, "How can you explain then that the Bible is the oldest religious book ever written?" That like,
Yeah, these people are not smart. These people are, and they're encouraged to be that kind of dumb. So,
Love
what's the
it.
next question?
Okay, next question is which of these biblical figures is most likely to have been a real historical person? And the answers were across the board, except nobody chose Moses. I think they saw your previous episode, so we're good on that one.
Good on the
13
15% who said don't know. That is a valid
Yes,
answer. Always
that
a
is
valid answer.
always a valid answer, and I should have added that for the other questions because that is always a good answer to go with. If you don't know, just say it. And so aside from that, then we had some other guesses. 13% picked Abraham, 24% picked David, 28% picked Solomon, 20% Jezebel, and then the rest were don't know.
I
So
kind of think David and Solomon should have been linked together in the same answer, and that would take it way over half. Totally understandable.
yeah.
But in fact, controversial take, I don't think either of them existed at all. Full stop. United Monarchy? No, did not exist. Jezebel. We know Jezebel existed. We know we have archaeological evidence for her. We know who her relatives were. We know her dynasty she came from.
wait,
And
for
not only that,
For the Catholics like me in the audience who never read the Bible, like what's the Jezebel story? Like who's
she's
this
the evil
Jezebel?
harlot queen of evil, whore of Babylon. It's a good story. You have to read it. It's
She's
actually
who
it's a terrible story.
Protestant girls are always called Jezebels.
Yeah. She
Oh,
was an evil foreign woman who led the people of Israel into false idols. And, because those Israelites, they're always forgetting there's just one true God and keep running off to,
so she's
silly
the real
Hebrews.
historical figure. That's surprising then.
She is for sure a historical figure. we can talk all about how David and Solomon are not real, how that United Kingdom we don't have archaeological evidence for it. What little we have fits in a shoebox is not conclusive at all. Abraham, that's right out,
Well, I'm kind of glad about that one because I hated the idea that the guy was just okay killing his son just because he heard voices.
Exactly. Well, basically, here's the thing. I mean, we know I don't have to tell you Adam to the Tower of Babel and the Noah and all that. That's all clearly just pure ass myth. But everybody from Abraham to Solomon is just as on a bad legendary footing. They do not seem to be real people. And what's worse than that is even when we get stories of real people like Jezebel, like Hezekiah, like all these other kings of Israel that no one knows and no one cares about, that don't have good biblical stories written about them. Even when we get their stories of real people in real events, we're getting the propaganda version from one side. And as soon as we get any input from archaeology and from other cultures, we get a completely different story. So that's the three kinds of bullshit we get from the Old Testament. It's pure ass myth, made up stories, and propaganda spins.
I love it. Okay, so along those lines, then we have our third question. Which of these events do we have archaeological evidence for?
All right, smartasses. Who the 7% of you said global flood?
Yeah, come
Well,
on.
it's all. I
I
don't know if we
should've-
have pose here or what, but
I think so.
maybe
Well,
maybe it's
funny.
people just peeking in for the first time and they believe this is
There's
a
a
thing.
great quote says, every expedition that's gone in search of Noah's Ark has found it.
Yes, I have been gifted multiple books by family members of the time they found the Ark, but then like the communists covered it up with a plot.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I've got many chick tracks, so we'll lay it all out for you. Yeah, absolutely.
yes, it's great.
Yeah.
The photos got lost in a shoebox in someone's garage, and then the Nazis
Okay,
stole them
so
or something.
for those
But the
three
good
people,
news, the
for
good
those-
news is the majority has it. All you guys who voted
Yeah.
for Babylon captivity, you're absolutely right. We have
Mhm.
abundant evidence that happened. Zero evidence for any of the others. And in fact, we have evidence that they did not happen. It's not just an
Yes.
absence of evidence, but we have plenty of evidence to say, nope, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I don't know if those are real three people really said, but somebody needs to put in the link for Ross Blotcher's Ark Encounter talk that we did here
Yes.
for those three people to watch, and then
Yes.
maybe they won't believe that anymore. Maybe.
I'll go grab it. That was a fun episode where Ross Blotcher goes to the Ark Encounter theme park. I'm not going to use the word museum in connection with that establishment, and shows what is being presented there. So yes, that was a good one. But
No, I
no,
have
we
to
do
give it
not
to
have
Ken Ham.
archaeological evidence of a global flood. We have archaeological evidence that societies have existed and continued to exist continuously for the entire period of time before and after
Bingo.
when this flood was alleged to have taken place.
So, and I've heard a lot of apologetics about that. Well, it wasn't global and it was just
Right.
local. But then you read the lines in the Bible where it says God's going to destroy everything on earth. Well, that doesn't make any sense then.
Well, why does the Bible say that then if it's not happened? Yeah. Same with the zombies in Jerusalem in the New Testament. It's like
Zombies. I don't get why that's not in all four gospels if it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Or anybody else. Nobody else noticed
Yeah.
either. Yep.
Okay.
Well, I will say
Okay.
one thing about the Ark Encounter. I'm really impressed that they were able to make it biblically out of gopher wood held together with pitch with no windows. And wait, what? It's not?
No.
It's not?
What?
No.
Oh.
Modern construction techniques with steel beams.
Yeah.
Aliens must have helped them build that back
Aliens
in the
must have
day.
helped them.
Like,
Yes, clearly.
No. I think I saw is it the Mel Gibson movie where there's like giant creatures that God sent down?
Yeah. Honestly, I went into that movie. It wasn't Mel Gibson. It was Aronofsky, I think. I went into the Noah movie a couple years ago expecting to hate it.
Russell Crowe. That's what
I expected to hate it, and I did, but for the opposite reasons I thought I would. I thought it was a really cool ass movie. It's but it's I was going to make up a fake Onion newsletter headline saying ancient Sumerians say that Noah movie is not Epic of Gilgamesh-y enough.
Oh, that would be funny.
Uh,
I like that. Okay, love it. And final question, here we
oh yeah,
go.
the most important of all.
Speaking of science fiction movies, um, which of the following science fiction novel did David Fitzgerald co-author? And this is a bit of a trick question. We also said the answer in the introduction.
I
But
do have to say I love all of you who thought I wrote all of the above, including a Doctor Who episode. That is
yes,
pretty
I
special.
love that. So,
Uh,
David, tell us the answer to this question and tell us about the red herrings that are
well,
mixed in
let's
here
break it
too.
down. I mean, yes, I did write Jesus Smithing in Action. That's very true, but it's not a science fiction novel. And Space Time Donuts is a science fiction novel, but I did not write it. Rudy Rucker wrote that. Under the Kilt, I didn't write that. Kilt Kilpatrick wrote that. But I am Kilt Kilpatrick. But it's not a science fiction novel. It's an erotica anthology, which we should all read if it's still in print. Hunt it down.
I believe it is. I Googled this when I found out about this in our pre-show, and it appears that people can still access this magnificent work that I have yet to experience, but am planning to.
One of my short list things to do in 2025 is to, if it's not still in print, if you can't get any copies, get it into print again with a new publisher. So we'll see about that. Doctor Who's right out.
Yes.
Nope, didn't do that. But yeah, the really high praise to the 10% of you who knew it was the Time Shards trilogy, which I'm so super proud of. I love that book. Kara's listening to the audiobook right now.
Yes.
Um,
I was so excited to find out about this, and I went straight out and got it on Audible. It's available on Audible. So if you
it's a
use
great
Audible,
Christmas gift or New Year's Day gift to yourself. Um, but the thing
yes.
about it is, like, I'm super proud of that because usually I go back and forth. I write a nonfiction book and then I write a fiction book because it uses different parts of your brains. With nonfiction, you have to like do your research. You have to
Mm.
cite your sources and do footnotes. Fiction, you don't have to do any of that. You just have to make it all up yourself. But when you're dealing with like a novel that has serious time travel and post-apocalyptic themes, you have to do all the research you would do for a nonfiction book, and you have to make it all up. But I love it. I love that book. I love the characters in it. I love the blend of history and science fiction, and it's super fun. Super
Yes.
fun.
I'm having a great time with it. Can recommend. So check those out. Those are your bonus reading assignments
There you go.
before next time. And with that, let's wrap up and go to the hangout. Thank you again, David, for sharing with us about the topic at hand, as well as letting us know about your other offerings that we can find on the interwebs.
Anytime, and thank you so much to everybody who showed up. I never don't want to be here all the time. I love it.
I love it. I love it. Well, you are welcome back again. I hope we'll have another episode with you and we can continue the conversation. And we're going to continue the conversation in the Hangout too. And don't forget to join us next week. We have several awesome speakers coming up next year. 2025 starts next Monday. Well, it actually starts on Wednesday, but the next time we're here next Monday, it'll be 2025. And we have John Gleason, the Godless Engineer.
Hey,
And we're going to have, after that, Amber Bellrand. We're going to have Forrest Valkai, Secular Rarity, Stephen Novella, Erica
so many.
Matthews.
Oh my God, so many awesome ones. Oh, that's
Yes,
fantastic.
awesome lineup. Come join us. Don't forget to follow us on the social media. I'm going to drop our link tree in the chat. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and of course, YouTube, where you can watch the episodes such as this one. And you may have joined us a few days ago for our first annual online virtual holiday party on our YouTube channel. We're trying out some new stuff and having some more live YouTube events. So look for us there. We may even have RfRx over there live on YouTube in the near future. Stay tuned for more developments on that. And Rob, how else can people get involved?
Wow. One of the best ways is to volunteer with us. We've learned that healing can come from helping others. So volunteers here find meaning and purpose by volunteering with recovering from religion. All of our services are supported by our staff of volunteers, and we're always in need of more people. I can't answer all the phones myself. And besides answering phones, there's so many things to do here. We need people to find and then vet and post the resources that Kara told you about before so that our clients and the agents can use those. We need people to host the support groups to support the online community by moderating the text chats. We need people to improve our IT system is always undergoing constant improvement. And even what we're doing right now, you can volunteer to support these meetings either live or helping to edit them and get them online for everyone else who couldn't make it on Monday. So to apply to volunteer, you can find the volunteer button at the top of our main page. Just fill out the form and someone will get back to you. And I'd like to mention we have a 3-minute, just three, very short video called RFR What We Do at the bottom of our main page. It's a great resource to say in like 3 minutes what we took 15 in the beginning to tell you. And you could refresh your memory about what we do and send it to any friends or family that you think might be, in need of our services.
Excellent. Dropped those links in the chat, and they're being overshadowed by the conversation around under the kilt, which is definitely stealing the thunder here. And with that, let's go to Daryl to wrap us up for the evening. Under a kilt. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. There's no kilts.
So we'll have to have Dave back on to tell us about what's under the kilt. I'm just can't imagine, but we'll let
Sure you
Dave.
can.
We'll let David tell us someday. And David, that saying is people are more important than beliefs, and it's one of the 5 principles of Oasis, and that's who first made it up back in about 2014 or so. Anyway, I think it's a really important kind of thing to keep in mind as we deal with other human beings. I'm here to tell you all that David's books are amazing, and this just is one of many. I've read every word that David has written. That's in the nonfiction area. I have not read any. I do not do pornography. I'm not into that slutty, sexy stuff at all. So I've never read one of those. But I will tell you, being a good former Christian guy that I am, Dave's books are always mind blowing because they really make you ask a whole lot of questions. And the rest of it, I won't say any more about my non being sexual person. So here we go.
Sure, Daryl,
I'm really,
sure.
but it did remind me. We were having a discussion before. I have not talked about my sex research, and I'm not sure if I've talked about it on this or not. Anyway, Tara, maybe that's something we should talk about. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I've already got you down for next year. You're doing the masturbation talk for us.
Oh, that's right. I forgot I'm doing
Uh-huh.
Maybe David would join me because we could probably have a mutual masturbation session or something.
Oh,
Oh
my.
wow.
Oh,
I don't
my.
know if they allow that on YouTube, but I mean, I don't know.
Okay. I've crossed the line, haven't I? I'm sorry about that. We'll have to do that. So I would suggest something that David hasn't said this, but I'm going to say it, that Christianity is not a monotheistic religion, and neither is Islam, because it's got at least 3 gods and usually maybe 5 gods. I've said this before, but can you name the 5 gods of Catholicism, or the 4 gods of Protestantism? And there's several gods within Islam too, but everybody says they're monotheistic.
Well, for Catholicism, Mary has to be in there, right, Dr. Ray?
Right.
Absolutely. Mary is one of them. But who's the most powerful God in the Catholic and Protestant and Islamic pantheon?
Oh, gosh.
Is it Satan?
Absolutely. Satan is the one that seems to be able to do everything. So he can overdo all the Yahweh stuff, and Yahweh can't seem to overcome him. And of course,
Yahweh's such a deadbeat dad, and Satan is Johnny on the spot 24/7 all the time. Bam.
He is. And I would suggest that the 2 key gods of Zoroastrianism are really Yahweh and Satan.
Yep.
I almost lost a good friend, and eventually did lose a good friend. I was ahead of you on this one, David. Back in 1978, my best friend was finishing a doctor's degree in theology. And I said, well, I believe the three wise men were Zoroastrian, and that's the symbolism of the influence of Zoroastrianism on Christianity. Ooh, he got so mad at me. He said, no, that cannot be true. And he would never talk to me again. We were still friends for like 30 years after that. But when my book, The God Virus, came out, that was enough. He couldn't deal with it anymore.
Oh,
I totally lost him as a friend at that time. He did not like the book, God Virus. So anyway, I was considering Zoroastrianism as a key input of Judaism and Christianity way back then.
and you know what, Daryl, that's not even controversial in religious studies circles. It's like not even controversial to say that.
Yeah.
And nobody thinks about the ramifications of, all this came from Zoroastrianism.
Yeah. So anyway, I always love it. And I don't disagree with David very often. I'm going to totally disagree with him here on this one. There is one true religion, and you guys can join if you wish. And all you have to do is pray to, and through me with a $10 donation, that'll work. If you donate $10 or more to the Recovering from Religion, then I, as the high priest of the Church of Flying Spaghetti Monster, will give you an honorary membership to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Just be sure and text me and let me know you gave the $10. Now, if you give a lot more than that, which we always appreciate, I might raise your status from honorary to official. Not everybody can be an official member, but if you give enough money to Recovery from Religion, I will ensure I'll make a special request to the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So anyway, and by the way, that's where all these other religions got their shit. Was from the Flying Spaghetti Monster. If you just read the Bible, the Flying Spaghetti Monster's Bible, you'll see it says everything that everybody else says. So where did they get it from? They had to get it from us. Yep. So there you go. And Kara, you have never heard that donation angle before, have you?
I have not. As the treasurer of this organization, I have to say that I don't know if the Flying Spaghetti Monster is going to be able to make good on any promises that may or may not have been made during the course of this recording. Asterisk.
It depends on their faith. If you have enough faith, maybe. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Thank you, David. David has now become an acolyte of mine. I'm rapidly finding he's coming on board with the FSM.
Let us smite the unbelievers. The Daryl has spoken.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure. I always love listening. Even though I've read all this, I've heard it all multiple times from your mouth, I always find it refreshing. You have a good way of delivering shit that I love hearing. Back to you, Kara.
All right. Thanks, Daryl, and thanks, David, and everyone for coming.